So the meeting is now live, so welcome to everybody to the first meeting of the Regulatory Committee this year. It's being webcast live on YouTube, so it will be available if you want to see it at a later time. I got to start off by reading all the names of the members to make sure everybody is present this morning. Can you confirm that you are in attendance and will remain in existence for the whole of the item to be discussed? So going through the list of the members, I personally am here. Lance, are you here? Can you confirm?
If I unmute, I'm here. Hello from Hayling Island.
All right, yeah, good. Ray Bolton, Ray, you're here. I think you're as deputy for Neville Penman, correct?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thanks, Ray. Chris Carter.
Confirm I'm present, Chairman.
Morning, Chris. Councillor Chowdhury, yes.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
Councillor Cooper, Mark Cooper.
Morning, Chairman. Present.
Yeah, good to see you, Mark. Councillor Rod Cooper.
Yes, good morning, Chairman. Present.
Councillor Jane Frankham.
Present.
Morning, Jane. Councillor Gibson, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Yeah, I can see you. Councillor Hare.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm here.
Morning, pal. Councillor House.
Present and awake.
Okay, we'll try and keep you awake. Morning, Keith. Councillor Gary Hughes.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Councillor Irish.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, I'm here.
Councillor McAvoy.
Yes, present, Chairman. Good morning.
Councillor Philpott.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, colleagues.
Morning, Stephen. And last but by no means least, Councillor Roger Price. Morning, Roger.
Morning, Peter. I'm present and here.
Okay, right. So we're all here. So just to go through the normal, try to keep you awake. We go through a roll call vote. You'll be asked individually whether you're for, against or abstaining on the item, and the voting will be conducted by Katie as usual. Can you keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking, and make sure you can be seen on the screen and visible to the public during the whole meeting. So I think we can go straight now to the agenda. So item number 1, apologies for absence. Katie, the only apology we've got is Neville Penman, I think. So everyone else is in attendance and Ray Bolton is deputising. Declaration of interest, item number 2. Members, you normally disclose them when the item is raised, and we've only got one, so I don't suppose you've got anything to disclose now. Item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do any members have any comments on the minutes of the last meeting, or can I take them as read? I'm assuming they're all okay.
Take them as read, Chairman. This is Councillor Quantrill.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that. Deputations. We've got 5 deputations on item number 6 this morning. They'll all have, including one county councillor, Jan Warwick. They'll all have a maximum of 10 minutes to speak on the item. And I'll allow a little break after every speaker to enable members to have any questions that they might want to raise before I go on to the next speaker. Moving swiftly on then, item number 5 is Chairman's announcements. I don't have any announcements to make this morning, and so we can then go straight to the next item, which is the main item, only item really on the agenda, which is the item relating to land at 3 Maids Hill at Winchester, which is an application for an inert waste recycling facility at land at 3 Maids Hill of the A272. We had the site visit on Monday, and members will remember that we had the original meeting in December, which was deferred for that purpose. A number of issues were raised at that meeting, and the purpose of the site visit was to look in particular at highway issues and amenity issues, which were the main points which were raised during discussions in December. The report that we have today updates those issues and addresses amenity and highway issues, and they are contained within the updated report. And therefore, I will now pass over to Amy Dales, who will give now a full presentation on the application as set out in the original paper of the 16th of December and the updated report which you all have before you. You will note the officer's recommendation, and I'll leave Amy to take the matter further. Amy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to check everyone can see that initial slide there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So as the Chairman has mentioned, this item was deferred at December's committee to allow for a site visit to take place, which took place on Monday. Obviously, due to COVID lockdown restrictions, it had to be a virtual meeting. So this item is for development of an inert waste recycling facility at land at 3 Maids Hill off the A272 in Winchester. So just some context to the site. You can see the site there surrounded by a red line. The A34 runs along the eastern side, which is this green line here. The A272 runs along the western side, which is this red line here. And the site is located in countryside near to a variety of small villages. So there's Littleton over here to the southwest, Kingsworthy over here to the east, and Worthy Down up towards the north. This slide helps to show the extent of the Littleton stud to the southwest, and also the nearest property which is associated with the stud, which is 3 Maids Bungalow, indicated just here. Again, you can see a closer view here of the A272 on the west and the A34 on the east. You can also see the motocross circuit, which is to the east of the A34 over here. This aerial view just helps to show some of the vegetation in the area, and also there's a permissive footpath that runs along the western side of the A272 in this belt of trees here. And again, the Littleton stud covers all of these fields down here to the southwest of the site. So this is a close-up site plan which demonstrates how the site will be laid out. So the site access here will go directly onto the A272. The application, as you've read, is proposing a 2-metre acoustic bund all the way round. This has now been amended in the southwestern corner, where it will now be 3 metres high. And there's proposed planting on top of the bund as well. You can also see the processed aggregates stockpile will be located here. The topsoil barn will be located here.
Can I just interrupt? Apologies. Yeah. I'm not seeing your mouse pointer. I don't know where the members are.
Oh, sorry. It might be because I've got 2 screens. Apologies.
Yeah, it's showing
can you
now.
see it now?
Yeah.
Yes, I see it now.
That's my fault. That's double screen. Sorry. I'll do that bit again. So yeah, there will be a 2-metre bund. You can see denoted by the dotted line here. And in this southwest corner is where it will now go up to 3 metres, which is the closest edge to the Littleton stud. This is the topsoil barn here. These are the tipping bays, and this, as I said before, is the processed material pile here. So these elevations just help to demonstrate the height of the topsoil barn and also the fall of the site. So the site is actually 4.5 metres higher on this western side, than it is on the eastern side by the A34. You can also see from this plan just some of the planting on top of the acoustic bums that's proposed. So this landscape plan is the up-to-date one, so you can actually, it might be difficult to see, but these little red marks here denote the height of the acoustic bunds. Okay, some photos of the site. We've got here the A272 looking north, and this is the site access here on the right-hand side. The permissive footpath is along here on the west of the A272 within these trees. And then this view here is looking south towards the Three Maids roundabout just here. So this is the proposed site here, and this is the existing vegetation that sits on the southwestern corner of the site. And the site access is just off the picture there, just at the bottom. So this view looks across from the Littleton Stud, this top view here. So this corner is the stud farm, and this belt of trees here is the southwestern corner of the proposal site. This is Stud Lane here. This is the Three Maids Hill roundabout, and then this road is obviously the A272 just here. The photo below is then the view from the other side. So this is the A272. This belt of trees is the northeastern paddock at Littleton Stud Farm. Just some photos here of the permissive footpath. So this again, this top photo is looking south. So the Three Maids roundabout is just here. This is the site access, and then the permissive footpath is within these trees. As you can see at the bottom there, that's the footpath. You can see the site just through the trees there in that gap. So some aerial photos of the site. So this top one is looking south. So you can just see that is the Three Maids roundabout in the background there. And you can see the existing vegetation, and just down here is the site access on the A272. And this view at the bottom is from the northwest corner looking east. So this belt of trees is the A34 along here and the slip road. Three Maids roundabout down here to the south, and then you can just about see the A272 along this side here. Hopefully this will be a little video of the same thing. So standing in the northwest corner, spanning from the north of the site across the east to the south of the site. Hopefully that will work. So then we've got a photo of the southwestern edge of the site again, just to demonstrate the existing vegetation, which will be increased as part of the proposal, and then a little video just to show on the ground. Okay, some more views here from the southwest of the site here. The roundabout, and then Littleton Stud Farm off in the distance there. And then at the bottom here, we've got a good aerial view that shows the A34 and the A34 slip road that run along the east of the site. The belt of trees all along the south and east of the site that exists at the moment, the A272, and then Littleton Stud Farm just down here to the southwest. Some photos of the stud farm. So this road here is Stud Lane. So this is looking east towards the roundabout. This white gate here is the entrance to the stud farm. And then at the bottom, this is actually a view from one of the top corner at Littleton Stud Farm. So this is their top paddock in the northeast corner. And this is the vegetation that faces and fronts the roundabout. In terms of consultations and representations on this one, Winchester initially objected based on a lack of adequate assessment for highways, landscape and archaeology impacts, but these have since been resolved. There were no objections from other statutory and non-statutory consultees, including highways, the EHO, archaeology, ecology and landscape, subject to the conditions that were included in the original report and subsequent update reports. Councillor Porter was informed of the application and indeed gave a deputation at December's committee. And there were 210 public representations received in relation to the application. Sorry. So the key issues associated with the site that were raised in December's meeting as well are the rural location of the site. So the site is located within countryside, which is relevant to Policy 5 of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan and Policy MRTA 4 of the Winchester District Local Plan. The Planning Authority is satisfied that the proposal will meet a need for recycled aggregates as per policies 17, 18, 27 and 30 of the Hampshire Minerals Plan. And if the use of the site ceases, it will be restored to agriculture. All of this is detailed within the original committee report from December. In terms of visual impact of the development, as you've seen, there's a lot of existing screening on the site, and the applicant is proposing further screening, which will be placed on top of the acoustic bunds. So it's felt that this is acceptable in terms of policy 10 and 13 of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. Highways impact and safety were also raised as an issue. The applicant is in the process of negotiating a Section 106 agreement for lorry routing, which will require the lorries to turn left out of the site onto the A272 and go to the 3 Maze roundabout, where they will then be required to go onto the A34. The Highways Authority and Highways England have both been consulted and didn't raise any problems and didn't suggest there would be any significant adverse impacts from this development. Potential amenity and health impacts, noise, dust, lighting, pollution and effect on the users of the right-of-way. The applicant submitted a noise impact assessment which demonstrates that the noise modelled would be below the lowest observable adverse effect level and therefore shouldn't cause any amenity impact. Dust is an issue that's controlled by the Environment Agency, and the applicant will be required to get an environmental permit for this, and they have in fact submitted a dust management plan that they've already submitted to the EA to us now as well. Impact on nearby recreational activities, including the Littleton Stud. Again, this is noise and dust issues, which I've just covered. Concerns over the hours of working, including the impact of nighttime operations. These are controlled by conditions which are included in the original report and subsequent update reports. A lack of or special need for the site and a lack of consideration for alternative sites. The applicant has demonstrated to the Planning Authority's satisfaction that there is a need for the site, and they have also included within their documentation a site selection review which considered alternative sites. And last but not least, the site provides a net gain in biodiversity in accordance with policy 2 and 3 of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. Therefore, it is the recommendation of officers that planning permission be granted subject to all parties entering into a Section 106 agreement to secure appropriate lorry routing. The conditions listed in Appendix A of the 16th of December 2020 committee report as amended by the associated update report and 2020 January 2021 update report. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for a very clear and concise presentation. Grateful to that. We will now go over to the deputies. They will each have 10 minutes to address the committee. And I think the first deputy this morning is David Bow, who is representing the Littleton Stud. David.
Good morning, Chairman and members.
Morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you once again for letting me speak. Sadly, you couldn't come and visit Littleton Stud, but I hope you've had the opportunity to view our video. It may have been a little bit amateurish, and due to the conditions in cloud cover, I hope it gave you an idea of, and went some way to show you who we are what we do and what we're trying to achieve. The video itself, it showed the close proximity to the site, but I think it demonstrates that we are going to be adversely affected, both the employees and the horses, by this proposed recycling site less than 100 metres from our boundary fence. We are not NIMBYs because we didn't object to the other proposed recycling site at Down Farm Lane, but we have objected strongly to this site. I think this site will be detrimental to us for all sorts of reasons, and it will affect the lives of all of us living here and our business. And there are 15 permanent jobs here, plus our homes. Many of us live on site in tied cottages. I'm not as prepared as I was last time because of the lots and lots of documentation that's been submitted in the last 48 hours by the applicant. But reading all of the reports and going back over everything once again, the thing that comes to light, and did do at the meeting, is that everybody can only base their opinions on the evidence that has been produced and put forward for them to read. Now, they start by saying that the environmental health officer had no objections whatsoever to TMR's proposed recycling plant at that site, but he wasn't really armed with all of the information. TMR from the very outset have been kind of scant in their report. The report on first glance looks very, very good. It's put together well, and no doubt geographically it looked like a very good site, a remote site with very, very good access to roads, major roads and whatnot. So from that point of view, it ticked all the boxes. But it is very misleading, and the environmental health officer, up until just recently, and you will see from all of the area footage of the proposed site, they never ever mentioned Littleton Stud. We were put down as arable land, and there was one bungalow. It is now they're starting to include us in all of their notes now, and saying that there are all sorts of measures being put in to suppress dust and to suppress noise and whatnot. They had a consultancy firm from London right in the last 24 hours, and Mr. Andrew Bias, he's gone on to say that, reading it from a legal point of view, there is no reason not to stop this site going ahead or to object to it, because the officers, and both the officers and the environmental health officer had no objections. But at the time, neither the officers nor the environmental health officer knew we existed. They didn't know there was 15 jobs. They didn't know there was a thoroughbred racehorse farm right beside them. They didn't know any of this. So yes, it sounded remote, it looked remote, and they conveniently forgot to include us, and that shows in all of their maps and all of their proposals. We are never ever mentioned. It is a bungalow at Three Maids, and that is it. They knew that we existed, but they decided not to include us. I spoke to TMR at the proposed meeting that sadly none of you could, or not at the meeting at Three Maids Hill, that none of you could join us sadly. And I spoke to him, and with all of their experts who said that the acoustic bunding at 2 meters high would be sufficient, they've changed that just in the last 24 hours to say they would raise it to 3 meters high. They're telling us that they can suppress the dust. And in one of the statements here from their legal people in London that was dropped in on us in the last 24 hours. Well, I only received it last night, so forgive me for being unprepared, but I did spend half the night reading this new documentation. But in point 7, he said he had, sorry, I do apologise, you'll have to forgive me, I'm just jumping back and forth. Point 12, it was regarding the dust particle management plan. And they say that they will be damping down, they will use spray bars, damping down, and there will be regular maintenance and daily monitoring. All of these things are weather dependent, and there's also scope for human error. It sums up, and this is taken from paragraph 1, 2, and 6. It says that this states that dust and particles could cause potential negative health impacts on employees and racehorses at the receptor, therefore putting it at medium risk. However, no dust is permitted to leave the site, and will be prevented from doing so with the mitigating procedures set out in this document and the Environmental Health H1 risk assessment. No dust will be blown to the receptor as the prevailing winds move on to the north. It goes on to say, they already acknowledge that dust and particles will have an adverse effect on us, the employees and the horses. And they are saying that no dust will leave the site. How can they say that no dust will leave the site? It's an open site. Prevailing winds may go in the direction they say, but there are often, because by virtue of the fact it's an upper ground, there's always different climatic conditions. And when dust leaves the site, it's too late. If there is dust blowing over on us, maybe in the winter there won't be so much dust, but you can imagine a hot summer with hills of aggregate, plant hire, dust, machinery. They cannot contain it. Absolutely not. I know it, they know it. Nor can they contain the sound. They're going to be operating. The site opens at 6. They operate from 7 till 6 every evening. And then on Saturdays, they're going to operate from 7 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That gives us a day and a half of rest. Sunday and a half day on Saturday. The rest of the time we will have to work in that environment with the risk of dust coming over and constant noise. And again, once more, I reiterate, with all of these values are notional, all of the reports are written notionally, what may happen and may not happen. And again, the environmental health officer can be forgiven for giving or not objecting because he wasn't armed with all of the correct data at the time. And we're sitting here, we looked at the site. You can see from the video footage from both of the drones sent up, both theirs and ours, that the vegetation during the winter is slim. They employed, I mean TMR that is, employed John's associates to do a landscape and visual appraisal. And they state in there that this, well, first of all, the report is not a full and visual landscape assessment. It doesn't constitute a full landscape. That's in their summary. But they go on to say that if they plant the bunds, that there will be visibility for certain months of the year, but it is predicted to lessen during the medium term, that is 7 years. It states that in writing in their own reports. So it'll take 7 years for the planting on the top of the bunds to have any effect. And if they have the same effect as the 30-year-old trees that are in existence there, they will have no effect because all of the camera work, video work that was done, if you look at it closely, you can see the site from the road and you can see the road from the site. Littleton Stud is less than 100 metres, and the photograph that the officer took of Littleton Stud paddock, a very well-used paddock, as you could see from the muddy bits around the gate, but that faces Three Maids roundabout. And that will be that will get dust and noise constantly. The house will have, employees won't be able to work there, and we have to work. I don't know, I hope you saw the video, but it showed the tranquil environment we try and set. I'm flabbergasted to think that this might go ahead, and I'm just trying my level best to put forward to ye what impact it is going to have on us. And we honestly stand to lose our jobs. Our business will be adverse affected because Littleton Stud has to be taken as a whole, not just as an isolated house and barn at Three Maids. It is a very, very, very well thought out organisation. And by virtue of the fact that we have to separate stock and all the rules and regulations we have to adhere to, we need Three Maids. And this recycling plant, nothing wrong with it, but it is in the wrong place, and they have misled everybody in all of the statements. And what amazes me—
That's a minute remaining.
Okay, what amazes me in the summing up of their legal counsel that they had done 24 hours ago, it comes down to bully boy tactics, where they're starting to quote other planning applications that weren't allowed to go ahead and trying to direct council members on how they should vote, and quoting quotes from Gateshead and Borough Council versus the Secretary of State on an incineration plant, which cannot be compared. But I just find the whole thing the dynamic has changed. They've now recognised us, and they're trying to throw in all sorts of other caveats. They set out their plan. They didn't include us. They didn't care that we were here, and they still don't. And they won't if they get go ahead. Me going over and saying, by the way, dust has blown over here, it will not stop them operating. They will not pack up their stuff and go or close the plant down. We will be damaged. Our health and our is at risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bow. Members of the committee, do you have any questions that you want to raise of Mr. Bow now? Councillor Philpott, and then Councillor Quantrill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just see if I can put my hand down because I don't want it remaining up. Sorry, thank you. Mr. Bow, I certainly understand your frustration at the avalanche of documentation that's appeared somewhat belatedly in this matter, and I've been reading some of it too. But I want to ask you about noise and your concerns about noise. Can you tell us a little bit more about the impact that you think that adverse noise from a site like this may have on your thoroughbred horses and the business that you're running?
Well, I'm concerned, obviously, for the horses because when the officers and the applicant were invited to come to Littleton Stud, and obviously you couldn't come. They came and they saw the Three Maids barn. We play music in the barns, and that is everything we did was not set up. They knew it, they could see it. It goes on all the time. The barns are very, very quiet. We play music. The horses are out. The video in the morning showed them coming out at 6 o'clock in the morning. Horses don't react well to stressful environments. The sound of the A34 cannot be compared. It is an ambient sound in the background, and as I said in my previous deposition, it is, once you get used to it, it's kind of soothing. You cannot compare that to high-pitched sounds which have highs and lows when you're crushing concrete and stone. It's a different type of noise. It's a very irritating noise, and it gets in on you as a human being, and also the horses. It's a stressful environment. There cannot be peace and quiet. You can't mitigate that sound. You can put up 2 meter bunds, won't help it, or 3 meter bunds for that matter of fact, and it will be there from 6 in the morning until 7 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon. The applicant has said that it will only be campaign crushing, which means that noise won't be going all the time. It will only happen for a month or a week or 2 weeks every couple of months. But that will be constant because they will be trying to use the machines to get the big maximum return from them as they're only being brought in on site. But added to that, the site will start off from 7 in the morning. I spoke to him about big shovel machines which will be lifting aggregate into hoppers or shifting it around and building it up into piles. All of these machines, for health and safety, have got reversing alarms on them, every one of them. Now they make beep, beep, beep constantly. And if they're going forward and back, I know an awful lot about plant because my family are involved in plant in Ireland. I know quite a bit about it. He said, the TMR said, oh, we won't have those, we will stop them. There's no way you can turn those off because of a health and safety implication. And if they're prepared to turn off the reversing alarms on their grab truck or their shovel trucks for lifting their JCBs, whatever you want to call it, that raises concerns anyway. But fundamentally, the noises, peaks and troughs of noises continually will adversely affect not only the horses, but it will adversely affect the staff who have to work there. We start at 6 o'clock in the morning and we finish at 5:30 in the evening. It's a long day and they have to work in that all the time with horses which get skittish and get bad tempered and get fed up, and they're hard enough to deal with in a quiet environment rather than being stressed. And when thoroughbreds get stressed, they're kind of, I would say, a little bit unpredictable. And all of those things, let's put it this way. If I were to set up a stud farm tomorrow, the last place I would set up a stud farm is anywhere close to a recycling plant or any plant with noise. I would look for somewhere that is quiet. Littleton Stud was set up in 1913 when the place was quiet. Littleton was quiet. There wasn't a major road. There wasn't as much traffic. But the traffic has moved and we've evolved and we've fitted in and we've gotten used to it. But we never ever thought for one moment that we would have to have an industrial plant 100 meters from our door. And I think it's just not right. We've been here for, well, I haven't been here since 1913, but the business has. And we hope it'll go on for years to come, regardless of development, housing and development around it. That does not affect us. Even the building work to do that for a period of time doesn't affect it. But to have a recycling plant beside us will finish us.
Can I just explore one more thing, Chairman? I'm sorry. Thank you for that very full answer, Mr. Bow. And I figured you were going to say something of that sort. You're breeding the horses at the Littleton Stud, presumably for racing, is that right? And they race at some of the famous venues around the country. Would that be correct? Yes or no to that?
That is correct.
So that's correct. So would you describe those places, those race courses, when the horses are performing, as noisy places or quiet places? And if your animals are stressed by noise, why are they not stressed by the noise at the race course? And what's the difference in your view?
It's a very good point. Very good point indeed. Yes, of course, race courses are noisy places, especially when you're coming to the finish in a tight finish and the whole crowd are cheering and it's exhilarating and everybody's shouting for the horse to win and the horses are running through that. But of course, the horses are at full speed and horses are fight or flight animals. So horses, we have to take all sorts of mitigating we have to do mitigating things for horses during their period of training. And everything we do with horses is a gradual process. So we bring them on gently from conception right through to maturity until they become race horses. And some individuals handle things better. A lot of horses don't even like going on horse boxes and being transported. But we can't bring the race course to them, so we have to bring them to the race course. They go on the race course and they run. And because they're competing against each other, they're flight animals and their adrenaline is up and they run through that sound barrier and that's it. If you had the crowd outside their door every day of the week shouting and roaring or that level of noise or stress, horses are very susceptible to ulcers, stomach ulcers. We give them all sorts of medication to negate it because they're grazing animals. They trickle graze rather than eat. So we have to try and simulate them living in nature as much as possible. So fundamentally, yes, race courses are noisy, but they only visit them when they're racing periodically. They are trained in quiet, tranquil environments, and they're taken out of that environment to go to a race course to run, but remembering that the horses are heightened and they're running with full adrenaline and the choke out, and they're given in their absolute maximum. And it's the same as any sportsman. Would Roger Federer be happy with the crowd in his bedroom every night shouting and clapping and cheering? He wouldn't, but he goes to a venue and he enjoys it. And that's basically a reasonable, yeah. I'm sorry. I hope my answers are okay, but I'm just.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim. That was fine. I didn't expect to hear about Roger Federer in that regard, but I think it's interesting.
Can we move on then? I think there's another hand up, but I can't see who it is.
It's Councillor Hare, Chairman.
Councillor Hare, yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. How many horses do you have at the farm?
At this moment in time, we have 87 today. That varies from time to time because our mares will start foaling now, so the numbers will go up slightly, but equally we will be sending the horses that the officers saw the other day. They will be going into training to start their campaign because the flat season starts in April. So these horses have come home for their winter rest, the ones at Three Maids, and they will go into training. So those 20 horses will go into training and they will be replaced by youngsters for the same cycle to happen. So the youngsters from last year's foals will go to Three Maids and start the journey to become racehorses. The yearlings will go into, the ones from last year have gone in, will be trained. They will come home for a break during the year and the cycle continues all the time. But our numbers go up and down because we send our mares away to Europe, often to Ireland, France and around England to be covered by stallions, to put them back in foal, to deliver more foals to go on. So the number fluctuates. the least we'd ever have on the farm at any given time, I would say, would be 65, and the maximum we would have would be probably 120.
Thank you. Chair, may I just ask one further question? At the beginning of your presentation, you said the applicant didn't actually mention Littleton Stud Farm. Did you challenge them? And what was their answer for not actually mentioning you on their details?
Well, it wasn't that I challenged them, because I was unaware until very, very late. Everything had been produced. All documents had been. The environmental health officer had already signed it off before I even was aware that anything was happening. It was done. I don't know how it happened. It fell outside parishes and it kind of fell between the cracks. And for some reason, naively it may be, but we were not aware. When I downloaded all of the documents and went through every single one of them, we were never mentioned once. And I have documents here going back. None. We are never ever mentioned. We have now been named. They now recognise we're here. And up until we started banging our drum, when we actually submitted letters of objection to and even at that stage, we weren't really recognised. It was until I put my deposition in at the meeting that they started to take notice, and they have changed tack slightly then. Until then, all of the reports, we are not mentioned once as Littleton Stud. It is one single house at a bungalow at 3 maids, and beyond it, north, south, east, and west is agricultural land. That's it. We have not got one mention. The largest employer, 15 employees, and we contribute hugely to the local economy and the national economy. Hugely. So, sorry, that's a long-winded answer to your very simple question. I'm sorry, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I move on to the next deputy, Mr. Bow, can I just ask one quick question? Sure. With regard to the traffic, the report that I have before me, paragraph 20, refers to the Hampshire County Integrated Character Assessment of 2012. And it says that the road noise in 2012 and associated visual intrusion are major detractors of tranquility in this open landscape. So 2012, it acknowledged the fact that there was a lot of noise from traffic. Is the nub of your objection that the horses have got used to that noise, but the noise which would emanate from the recycling centre would be different and would be a problem for the horses? Is that essentially what you're saying?
It is. We have gotten used to the road traffic noise, but we have got grave concerns about the different level of noise that is going to emanate from the recycling plant.
Okay, thanks for that.
Chairman, I had my hand up before you spoke.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
Did I ask a question?
Yes, by all means. I didn't see your hand up.
Mr. Bow, understand your deep concerns about dust and noise, and in your deputation you mentioned about another application which you said you didn't object to. Coming back to this one, how far away from Littleton Stud would this have to be, this site, such that it didn't cause problems to your stud?
We didn't object to the down farm lane because it's across the other side of the A34. I have never looked into it. I've never heard it. It has been running on a much smaller scale for quite a while. It has not affected us in any way, and so why would I object? I have no issues with anybody doing anything, and that includes housing developments that are close by. We have never objected to any of them. The reason being is you've got to live and let live, and we're in a progressive society, and I'm all for that. How far would this site have to be away from us? As far enough away that we can't hear it and it doesn't cause us any impact. It's about the noise and the dust that concerns me. I cannot afford to lose staff. I cannot afford for staff to be going around hanging their heads night and day. They came to work in a lovely place, and knowing we live on the edge of the A34 and the ambient sound in the background, we know that. We live with it. We're happy with it. We don't have an issue with it. But to answer your question, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to ramble. To answer your question, where would the site be? So long as it did not impact on us, I have no objection to the site, but it is too close and it will affect our business. So it needs to be far enough away that it, not that we can't hear it, and it doesn't, and we're not adversely affected by its dust.
Thank you, Mr. Bow. Does that answer your question? Then we move on to the second deputy, and that's Councillor Stephen Burgess, who is the chairman of Littleton and Harestock Parish Council. Mr. Burgess.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to speak again at the Regulatory Committee. As you say, I represent Littleton and Harestock Parish community. You remember we provided a fairly longish written submission, and I presented this to you at the December meeting, so I'll keep my comments short this morning. Just picking up from what David Bow said a few minutes ago about the two separate planning applications, and I know it's not a material consideration for you here this morning, but we as a parish council did object to the second or the first application across it down farm because of its closeness to the Littleton stud, and that application we got very, very late anyway, and I don't think the Littleton stud had ever got an opportunity to assess it anyway. But from that perspective, we have two located potential recycling centres within 450 metres of each other. And while it may not be a material consideration for your decision, it is certainly a material consideration for the residents of Littleton and Harestock. Secondly, the eastern end of the Littleton area is only about 1 kilometre from the recycling site. And I know you've mentioned about sound this morning, and I can say to you, as our experience is, that we can hear the A34 in the distance, and we can hear the railway trains even further east. I think we will definitely hear the aggregate crushing operations because it's a different sound anyway. And we've had some 200 objections to this, which reflect all sorts of different anxieties. And I continue to get information from residents about noise and dust, even though it has been addressed in the most recent documentation. So I'll just summarise my the parish council's objections very quickly. First of all, one of policy. We were alarmed at the change of use to the rural area of Three Maids Hill and its industrialisation in terms of the whole spatial strategy for North Winchester. We're still unclear about where the district plan is going, and we're about to see, I think, the public consultation on the local plan. I hope that's going to be very soon. But we're also aware of the strategic land allocation that's been around for some time that brings potential development right up to the top of the Three Maids Hill roundabout. Excuse me. I must also remind you about the proposed redevelopment of Sir John Moore Barracks, which is not particularly in the public domain at the moment. And the land that runs up to Three Maids Hill, and there may be homes and buildings less than 450 metres away from the two proposed recycling centres from as early as the mid-2020s. Secondly, locality. We do not think this application, for whatever's been said now about it, does not assess its location clearly and ignores the potential impact on the Littleton stud. And I'm not going to repeat everything David said this morning because we concur with his points. But I am surprised the supporting papers now downplay very much noise and dust as points of contention. And the decision we're making here, I think, this morning is in the context of potential damage to this multi-million-pound internationally recognised horse breeding business. And thirdly, our objection consisted of traffic. Now, I understand the planning application states that HGV traffic will only arrive and depart using the nearby strategic road network, which is very welcome, and presumably the A272 North as well. Now, although again, it's not a material consideration for you this morning, the other planning application only implies this as a restriction. And the problem we face is that The immediate east-west routings for HGV potential traffic from Three Maids Hill is generally poor. Even so, HGV drivers will be tempted to route through North Winchester and the rural villages of Littleton and perhaps Crawley to travel west, possibly through Headbourne Worthy to travel to the east and into the Winchester suburbs from the north. HGV traffic moving around North Winchester roads will hit a traffic pattern already overloaded, despite a sort of almost casual response from Winchester City Council, which you've seen. And this is, I'm talking about pre-pandemic road loadings. Now, we've yet to see the impact of traffic from the growing Kings Barton 2,500 homes just down from Three Maids Hill, and Flowerdown, another 1,000 homes, possibly with some light industry and even some office accommodation. And we have concerns about developing traffic density in North Winchester and any potential HGV loading. Now, if you approve this application, we would welcome the imposition of formal traffic routing controls, which would restrict HGV traffic in the area, particularly through the rural village of Littleton. So I'm here now to answer any questions you might have from a Littleton and Herstock parish community perspective.
Mr. Burgess, thank you for your deputation. Members, do you have any questions of Mr. Burgess? Can't see anyone has. So I will.
There are no hands raised, Chairman.
Sorry?
There are no hands raised for questions.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll move on to the third deputy this morning, and that's Councillor Mel Iredale from Headbourne Worthy Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all.
Morning.
And thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak. So we at the Headbourne Parish Council unite with our neighbouring parish councillors and Littleton Stud in continuing to remain strongly objected to this planning application. We're also disappointed with the lack of consultation with us at the council and indeed other local parish councils. Three Maids Hill is a northern gateway to an historical, beautiful city. The industrialisation of this rural approach to Winchester and its northern villages will have a negative impact on the cultural ambience of the city and its outskirts. We therefore consider it highly inappropriate to convert this particular greenfield site into a waste recycling plant. We also did object to the Downs Farm proposal as well, which is in the vicinity to this site. The proposed volume of HGV traffic accessing the site will not only add to an overload, will not only add to an already overloaded A34, but with the proposed Brexit customs lorry park on the A31 and the proposed work on junction 9 of the M3, additional traffic will only add to this congested strain on the A34. And also, as Councillor Burgess has pointed out, with new developments in North Winchester, there's already going to be a strain on the local network with increased traffic. The endangerment of pedestrians is of great concern. Should, for whatever reason, slight traffic be diverted from the A34 onto local roads, for example, if it's shut because of an accident or a breakdown, etc. This concern especially relates to children accessing local schools and sports organisations in the area. There are existing road safety concerns with regards to Andover Road, which leads up to the proposed site. Indeed, local residents have recently campaigned to improve road crossing facilities. And this is based on existing traffic volumes, thus excluding additional traffic as the development grows and heavy duty vehicles. Andover Road is due to be redirected to Winchester Avenue, which runs through the very heart of the Kings Barton development. This is also an access road to the Barton Farm Academy Primary School. This road has grass-lined ditches at either side in lieu of payments, and negotiating it at the best of times for a pedestrian will be difficult once a reroute is finalised. Should HGVs be diverted to this road, this would prove to be of great concern to the residents and the parish council. With regards to noise pollution in our parish, we already experience this from a busy Andover road, from the A34 and the railway line. The additional road traffic will regrettably add to this. Residents in our parish have already had to live with noise pollution. Pollution from the development, the construction and the activity that's at the motocross facility. This is located near the proposed site. In addition, noise will be generated from the activity of the site. We note that there is an application to have 10 night works per annum. Would the local councils, on behalf of our residents, be notified of these arrangements in a reasonable time frame, should this request be accepted? We understand measures have been taken to reduce noise pollution generated at the site. However, noise is unavoidable by the very nature of recycling works. We would like to know how these noise levels will be monitored. Air pollution in the area will be worsened by fuel emissions, dust and other air particles generated by such a proposed facility. These will be deposited on residential areas and farmland, depending on the direction and the speed of the winds. No amount of mitigation can eliminate this. We would be interested to know if the projected 50 to 76 vehicle movements per day would be staggered to avoid a reduction in vehicle numbers during periods of high local traffic and pedestrian movement, for example, school rush hours. As the proposed operating hours on Saturdays are less, what is this likely to equate to in terms of HGV movements? We are concerned about the volume of water usage. It is proposed that collected rainwater in a topsoil barn is to be used for the cleansing of the HGVs in situ. In a period of climate change and reduced rainfall, what proposals are there to generate water during prolonged dry spells as we've experienced in 2020, should they continue to occur? That's all I have to say. So many thanks for your kind attention and to the chair for allowing me to address the committee with our sincere concerns. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you for your deputation. We're all grateful for that. I'm not sure whether members have got any questions of Melanie this morning. Any hands up? I can't see any, so we move on then. Thank you, Melanie. We move on now to the fourth deputies, and this is that's Stuart Austin and Luke Bridges on behalf of the applicant, and you have together 10 minutes. Over to you both. I can't hear you.
Councillor. I'm Luke Bridges.
All right.
Stuart should be coming on soon. Hopefully you can see me okay.
Yes, I can now.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll just sort of do my deputation and then Stuart will contribute after. Do we have 10 minutes in total between us?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Luke Bridges of MTS Environmental and have worked as part of the consultant team supporting TMR South Coast for their planning application at 3 Maid Hill. I'm also the technically competent manager in charge of ensuring the facility complies with the environmental permit. I hold a certificate of technical competence required by the Environment Agency regulatory system. As you all have heard from the officer and read within the committee report, the proposed development is an inert recycling facility at 3 Maid Hill, has been subject to detailed assessment and thorough analysis by key statutory consultees, including Environmental Health, County Ecology, Landscape and Archaeology Officers, the Highways Authority, Natural England, and the Flood Authority and the Environment Agency, all of whom have no objections to the proposal. Some of the local concerns are caused by negative impacts from previous activities held by the motocross sites on the other side of the A34. However, such sites as these are unregulated, whereas the TMR site is highly regulated and so cannot be compared to the motocross site. TMR have a comprehensive environmental management system that is approved by the Environment Agency. As part of this EMS, I wanted to explain some of the practical perspective how dust and noise have been mitigated. The facility will have an environmental permit, and we're currently discussing the details with Mark Oxford from the Environment Agency on how all the mitigations will work. No permit will be issued to TMR unless the EA are 100% happy that the site has sufficient systems and procedures to ensure dust does not leave the site. This will primarily be done by monitoring procedures and hard infrastructure, such as dust suppression systems. The site also has been designed to minimise the opportunity for dust to become airborne, which is mainly caused by vehicle movement. Vehicles will follow a one-way system at a fixed slow speed. This route will be fitted with a dust suppression system, so during dry periods, no dust could become airborne. Screening and crushing plant will also be fitted with dust suppression systems. To be completely enclosed by dense vegetation, providing a further screening to capture dust particles and retain them on site. The drainage system has also been designed to ensure TMR can maintain 225,000 litres of water dedicated to dust suppression measures. Littleton Stud did not object to the other recycling facility, which used the same crushing plant as Three Maids and is virtually the same distance, so we see no reason why the TMR site will impact on the Littleton Stud. Most objectors have commented that they have no objection to recycling and they support recycling in principle. The reality is that the UK government have set national targets for zero waste to landfill. This means we need to increase the number of facilities required to deal with the waste generated, as landfill is no longer an option. This is good news for society, but facilities that manage inert aggregates cannot be built in urban areas and need to be near major transport links to minimise the impact on local road networks. Hampshire County Council policies allow inert recycling facilities in rural settings as it enables sufficient space to be allocated for operations and mitigations. Due to the available space on the TMR proposal, we have been able to design a facility that achieves least environmental impact with the largest recycling operational benefits. We've done this by building ecologically enhanced bunds to reduce noise, but more importantly, act as a visual screen around the whole site. Furthermore, the bund planting design will help retain dust and result in a net biological gain for the facility, which is normally exceedingly difficult to achieve. The application comprises of 1.9 hectares of principally lower grade 3B soil with a smaller percentage of 3A soils. All these soils would be retained on site in a boundary bund. In the event the waste management use ceases, a restoration plan has been submitted that would return the land to productive use. However, the proposed use is not unproductive. Over half the area would be turned from low productivity agricultural monoculture to an area of enhanced increased biodiversity with a range of new habitats created for multiple species. By approving this valuable resource management facility, you'll be approving the creation of new habitats for birds, mammals, invertebrates and native butterflies. The Three Maids site has been designed with sustainability at the forefront and is a prime example for Hampshire to use as best practice for future sites in the county. TMR consider a wide range of sites before proceeding with Three Maids Hill. This search and selection process is detailed in the submitted site selection review report. The process from the initial search to today has taken 2 years. If permission is granted, there will be a further period of time to discharge the planning conditions, finalise the environmental permit and develop the site so it can become operational. Hampshire has a pressing need for new waste management capacity, and the site location is supported by policy and approval is recommended by officers. To restart the search process and planning process now would put TMR back 2 years, result in continued under provision in the county for waste management and recycled product manufacture. TMR are committed to working with the local community, and TMR Managing Director is happy to chair a local liaison group should any concerns be raised. TMR will use this liaison committee to further refine the operations of the site to the satisfaction of the local community. The proposed inert recycling facility at 3 Maids Hill therefore provides an excellent example of sustainable development and will play an important role in the future management of inert waste in Hampshire. The positive recommendation from planning officers at both the pre-application and formal application stages, together with the support of key consortees, is the clearest demonstration as to both the suitability of the site and its excellent design. I would therefore respectfully urge members to adopt a recommendation before you and approve this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for that. Members, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Chairman.
Councillor Bolton. Yeah, Councillor Bolton and Councillor Philpott.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Could I just check whether there is just over 3 minutes remaining, whether the deputation did want to finish with Stuart, if Stuart wanted to add anything to the deputation before we take questions?
I would be grateful if Stuart could just use the remaining time for his contribution.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, by all means. Yeah, I thought.
I'd hand it over to Stuart then.
Yeah, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Luke.
Yeah,
so I'll just I'll paraphrase what I was going to say. I was going to speak for longer, but obviously the changes that have been made by TMR since last month have been set out to you. Further information on noise and dust and highways to strengthen the recommendation that's been put before you today. I just wanted to very quickly just make a few points in relation to the stud farm. Obviously, you've heard very eloquently today from David, and we understand his concerns. And as Luke mentioned, we'd be pleased to set up a liaison group to work with the local community. You members saw the video prepared by the stud farm, and just a couple of points to pick up from there. Firstly, it highlights that at 6 a.m. in the morning, the stud farm, including the area around 3 Maids Bungalow, is operational as a place of work. And there appears to be a misconception that TMR will also be operating at 6 a.m. This is not the case. The site will not open until 7 a.m. and TMR have committed to not operating the largest processing plant until 8 a.m. The video also highlights the quietness of the stud farm. This is not disputed. Indeed, the stud farm is very different from the application site, as members would have seen on the site visit. The application site is surrounded on 3 sides by A roads, and even with reduced traffic and current lockdown, the volume of the traffic noise means one has to speak more loudly and listen more carefully when having a conversation, whereas at the stud farm, you can communicate more normally. There's a marked difference in the noise environments of the 2 sites, which are at different topographical levels. And the noise from the surrounding roads effectively envelopes the application site, whereas the stud farm is adjacent to the far quieter stud lane. It's also been put out there's an expectation when working at the stud farm to be in the countryside, although that simply reflects the practical requirements of horse racing. But the countryside is not exclusive to horse racing, and many activities and industries place demands upon it. Indeed, it's centuries of human endeavour and human design that have shaped the countryside. The Minerals and Waste Plan is clear that inert recycling is one modern day sector that is best suited to a countryside location, along with quarrying and mineral processing, which in combination play an important part in delivering a sustainable economy, a sustainable society and a sustainable environment. Indeed, there are already examples of quarrying and waste management sites operating in close proximity to horse racing and equine facilities across the country. Indeed, agricultural use. Sorry, Kate.
No, sorry, I'll just let you know there's a minute remaining.
Thank you. Agricultural uses of the countryside can actually pose a far greater threat to equine facilities. The harvesting of hay or other dusty crops, or the growing of high pollen crops such as rape, can trigger pollen allergies in horses, and horses can suffer from pollen allergies in the same way that humans can, but also in the same way as other domestic animals. And I say this as a horse racing fan with shares of my own in horses. It's an important industry that provides vital jobs in the rural economy. And the love and attention given by staff to horses in their care cannot be questioned, but it remains an industry, and there are no statutory designations that place its importance above any other, nor are there any special protections that elevate racehorses of any other domestic or agricultural livestock. And in the hierarchy of receptors, it is human occupiers of residential property that top the list, and the assessments for this application and the statutory consultee conclusions have demonstrated that human health and amenity will be fully protected as part of this development. And in considering this application, members should not invert this hierarchy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. In essence, can you confirm that the three things that you have put forward, which wasn't available in December, is that you are happy to agree with a Section 106 agreement, lorry routing agreement. Number two, you have yesterday agreed to making the bund on the southwest corner 3 meters high as against 2 meters high. And you have also indicated that you would be happy for a liaison panel to be set up if planning permission is granted. Is that in essence what you have agreed to since December?
In essence, yes. Yeah, we've the routing agreement is agreeable, and TMR went further than originally requested by proposing to have a left turn only out of the site rather to avoid the A272 A30 junction as well. The liaison group mentioned last time, happy to do that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, okay.
I would just like to also just add that David mentioned about the reversing noises. When we met on site with David, we basically just said we would modify the reversing noises to another standard technology which is used within construction. Instead of the bleepers, they are push noises, so they're much quieter, but they're still perfectly legal in terms of health and safety. So we wouldn't put any of our employees for TMR at risk by modifying the reversing alarms so that they're quieter for the horses, but they still make sure that there aren't accidents on site.
Thank you, Luke. I've got a lot of hands gone up now. I think Councillor Bolton, you were number one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Amy, for the virtual site visit yesterday, and also TMR for the video, the aerial video of the site. Mr. Bridges, you mentioned the TMR's site selection studies. From the virtual site visit and your aerial video, this 3 Maids Hill, where you're proposing the site, is the bottom third, the southern third of that whole field. Did you, in your site selection, consider the top third, the most northerly part of that field?
Because of the access to the road, that is a key point in recycling sites. They ideally need to be next to trunk roads. So it would have caused bigger problems to consider it at the top end of that field. So in terms of access to the A34 trunk road, to keep the vehicles off the local road network, that bottom section was the obvious choice. And so that's why we put it there.
Happy with that answer, Councillor Bolton?
I just thank Mr. Bridges for the answer.
Thank you. Okay.
Stuart, would you like to comment on that?
Sorry?
Would you like to comment on that, Stuart?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. Then we move to Councillor Philpott. Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't want to try anybody's patience. I've just got a few questions, and I'll try and be as quick as I can, if that's okay, Chairman.
Yep.
I want to confine my questions, if I may, to the dust management plan, which I have read. In that dust management plan, you've pointed to 11 receptors and 2 sensitive receptors, and I know on the map where those 2 sensitive receptors are going to be. Can I just ask you just to clarify for us, for members, what the difference is between a receptor and a sensitive receptor? That's the first question.
A sensitive receptor can be something which is sort of, human, essentially, whereas another receptor, agricultural land, would be classed as a receptor. But if it's a human receptor, it would be classed as a sensitive receptor. Animals aren't technically classed as sensitive receptors on the hierarchy.
I see. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. In your dust management plan, you say, and I just quote it, it says trees surrounding the site and those to be planted on the ecologically enhanced bunds on the site perimeter will also act as a buffer to screen dust and particulates. Are you able to give us a more technical answer as to how trees act as a screen for dust and particulates?
In the dust management plan, because we're able to start from scratch, we're not relying on sort of, bowsers as such. We can design into the road structure and the design of it a mechanism to keep the ground moist. Once you keep water on the access roads, dust can't get kicked up. Okay, so in the central part of the crushing area, storage area, you've only got 2 pieces of plant. The main way that dust can be generated is through vehicle movement. So because of the design of the site with the one-way system going around the whole site, we can permanently keep the haul road damp. So therefore dust won't be kicked up in the first place. That's the most important part of this development. We're able to develop a sustainable design to mitigate the risk. You've got a bund around the whole site with planting, dense planting to increase biodiversity, but should a certain amount of dust be kicked up in unusual, unplanned circumstances, they will be captured by the plant vegetation, the leaves and the branches, which then just stop it in its transit and then fall down when it rains and just goes into the ground. So for us, in terms of the design, surrounding the whole site with a bund with dense vegetation is the best way to mitigate dust. In terms of a secondary risk management provision, the primary risk management provision is the design and the dust suppression around the haul road. That will stop dust from basically being kicked up in the first place. And I appreciate these decisions are difficult for you all, but because it's an agricultural site right next to a motorway, we were able to design something that really is quite unique. And so we're trying to get a zero impact recycling facility. And we genuinely believe that once we've got this going, this should be an example of best practice. And TMR do want to basically mitigate all risk with the local community, which is why they've created the liaison group. Any opportunity to resolve issues is really, what that liaison group's for. And it's just a sort of an example of, Littleton Stud is important to TMR, which is why we suggested we modify the reversing noise on the vehicles and also increase the bund just a bit further, even though the existing tree line is probably sufficient in summer when you're going to get dry periods to stop dust moving that direction. We've also got an prevailing wind is in the opposite direction to the stud farm. So it only goes towards the stud farm 2% of the time per year. So if Littleton Stud are happy to sort of, with the other crushing facility on the other side of the road and have no objection to that, personally, we see with all the mitigation that we've put in place, they shouldn't have any objection to the TMR site, because essentially the other site is using the same equipment to crush and they haven't got any problem with that. So there really shouldn't be a significant impact on the Littleton Stud from the TMR site.
So, Chairman, there's a couple more points I just want to clarify, and I'm not responsible for the length of the answers. I'm making my questions as short as possible.
I know that.
In your dust management plan, you've mentioned a number of times visible pollutants. And for example, you say, quote, no visible pollutants should leave the boundary of the site. Is there any specific reason why you mentioned visible pollutants leaving the site rather than just, pollutants in terms of dust?
Yeah, I mean, essentially because this is an inert recycling facility, there's no hazardous element to it. So there's no contaminated soils, there's no hydrocarbons, there's no burning, there's no invisible contaminants. So therefore, one of the critical things is all staff will be trained to observe typical weather patterns, dry periods, and so there's a visual.
So can I just clarify? So my understanding of that is that you're saying no invisible pollutants will leave either because of the nature of the inert material. Yeah. Okay.
The only thing that is a main impact is the visible dust.
Okay. Last question, if I may, Chairman. Sorry.
Yeah.
1.15 on your dust management plan, you say, and I'll quote it for you, it says, implementing the measures set out in this management plan will ensure that no dust emissions will escape the site boundary. And then at 1.24, when you're speaking of receptor number 4, which is the one at the bungalow, the Three Maids bungalow, you say, and I quote that, this is considered as a sensitive receptor as the property is in close proximity to the site and so is susceptible to the adverse effects of exposure to increased levels of dust and particulates. However, the distance between the site and the home forms a potential buffer zone and allows time for dust and particulates to disperse before it could reach the receptor. So on the second quote, you're suggesting, or you're actually not suggesting, you're saying that dust will leave the site, but actually will have time, as you say there, to disperse before it reaches the receptor. But on your first comment, you say that it won't leave the site at all. Which one of those two statements is true? Is it that the dust will not leave the site at all, as it says in 1.15, or is it that in 1.24 that the dust will leave the site, but will have time to disperse?
The dust management plan is a risk management tool. So essentially, we identify the bungalow as a receptor. Now, the regulatory permit condition would be that dust does not move from the site. So that is the default position. If an unusual situation, one event, 2 events a year, dust would leave the site, then it still wouldn't impact on the bungalow because of the distance and the time that it's got to settle.
Okay, are you happy with that?
I just wanted to find out which one of those two statements was true, and I'm not sure I got an answer to that, Chairman.
All I can say is that when the dust plan is implemented, that is a draft plan anyway, so the Environment Agency have still got to approve it. The default position is the position that dust will not leave the site.
So the first, okay, I think we have, so the first answer is correct. It won't leave the site. Can we move on then to Councillor Hare next? Hal.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bridges, in your presentation, deputation rather, you said that you would create new habitat for the species. Where and how do you propose to create a new habitat for the species that will be affected?
Okay, well, at the moment it's just low-grade agriculture, so there's little opportunity for species to sort of exist within the field. So within the bunds, we've had ecological consultants develop a bund design that allows us to use certain species to create the maximum biodiversity within the top of the bund planting. So there will be increased species within the planting done on the top of the bunds throughout the whole site. And then furthermore, we've allocated another 20 metres of a graded bund coming down, which will be allowed for natural calcareous species of native butterflies. So there'll be a specific area allocated to butterflies.
Thank you. Just want to come back to that quickly. Now that you've increased the height of the bunds, will that make any difference?
No. So essentially the same planting scheme will be implemented. We've just increased the height of the bund to improve the acoustics based on the site visit that we had with David.
So the increase in height will reduce the noise effect, is that correct?
Yeah, as well as improve the dust, suppression and the ecological enhancement.
Okay, Councillor Cooper now, that's Rod Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My couple of my questions revolve around the potential night working, which I believe is 10 nights per year. is this limited? Is this limited to the 10 nights? And what will be the noise and lighting impact on those 10 nights of the year?
I think that's covered in the planning conditions, that it is up to 10 nights per annum, and the lighting is set out, what such lighting as exists is set out in the paragraph relating to lighting and noise.
The other point that I'd like to pick up on that was made earlier was regarding the water collection. Is there also a plan for water if there isn't sufficient rainfall?
Yes, so in the dust management plan, we have to put provisions for the supply of water in extreme dust periods. So more details of that would be developed once we've got approval, but essentially that 25,000 litres tank will be maintained at all times for the dust suppression system.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one other hand up, but I can't see who it is.
We've got Councillor Gibson, followed by Councillor Quantrill, Chairman.
Right, okay. Councillor Gibson next. Andrew.
Yeah, my point, I'm not really too concerned about traffic. I'm more concerned about noise. Both the presenters, Luke Bridges and Stuart Austin, mentioned the other site, which has not been complained about, and they both sort of indicated it was equidistant. Now, can you just, I mean, it may be, Peter, you can help me. Where is that site? Because have I missed something in the documentation?
I don't think, I don't know where the other site is, Andrew.
But it is quite significant that both the Stuart Austin and Luke Bridges have said that it's equidistant. And as my main concern is noise, I'd just like to know, is that equidistant or is that a bit not quite true?
If I can comment on this one. Yeah. So there's an application on the other side of the A34. There's where the motocross site is. Adjacent to that, within the same land holding, is a proposal for a road planings facility. So it's different in some respects. It's more limited in the range of materials that it will process compared to TMR's site, but it will use some of the same equipment.
I've got a satellite map on the screen. Where is it exactly? Is it near the training kennels? I can't quite see exactly where this site is.
I don't know if Amy can put the site location map back up.
Because the point is, you've both said that it's equidistant, and I think that's quite an important concern, seeing that I'm particularly concerned about noise.
Can anyone tell us where exactly it is?
Amy, are you happy to show them on the map, or do you want me to describe it?
Lisa, if you can, far ahead.
That's absolutely fine. So you can see the red line area for the site annotated in the centre of the map. You can also see the motocross circuits annotated on just to the other side of the A34. So that is it's in that locality, the other proposal, which is at Down Farm. Amy's just pointing out there.
So it's further. It's a smaller site and it's further away. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it's the other side of the A34 from the site that we're currently looking at.
So it's not really relevant from a noise perspective.
Obviously it's another proposal in the locality, but it isn't material necessarily to this application, and it's certainly not even got planning permission at the moment. It's still going through the planning process.
Okay, can I just ask one more question, Peter? Yeah. The difference between again, it's because noise is my main concern. The difference between a 2-metre bung and a 3-metre bung. I mean, how different what is the significance?
Well, that's yeah. Well, which of the applicants deputy is going to answer that?
Thank you, Councillor Latham. I'll just address that one. So the original noise impact assessment identified that a 2-metre bund would be required in the orientation of the nearest property, and that was what was designed in, and all the modelling calculations based on including that bund demonstrated there'd be no impact on the nearest property, and the EHO supported those conclusions. So the site has been designed so that the processing plant is central within the site, and then between that and the nearest property is a distance of some 200 plus metres, and across the interim distance there's a 4-metre high stockpile, push walls from storage bays, and the boundary bunding and vegetated planting, which all act as acoustic barriers. Now, there's no necessity to increase the height of the bund, as that's already been demonstrated as being effective at 2 metres, but listening to concerns that were raised last month, we have the capacity to increase the height of the bund to 3 metres without impacting on the operational footprint of the site. So we thought it was a neighbourly thing to do to try and just further address any sort of concerns that are raised.
And is it based on science? Like you go up an extra metre, the noise goes down a fraction, or is it just a gesture?
Yeah, I'm not an acoustic technician, but my understanding from these is once you've delivered the acoustic benefit, which the 2-metre bund delivered, anything beyond that actually makes very little difference because you've already achieved what you need to do. But increasing it can, if it helps screen it more visually, it may be more a perception issue than anything else.
I mean, obviously, logically, I did science as my first degree, so I mean, logically, the higher the bung, the less noise is going to come out of the site. I just wondered whether I disagree with you that it won't make a difference. I think it will make a difference. I just wondered what the percentage was. That was all.
And they do have the ability to sort of deflect noise,
which is 4 metres high, immediately behind it as well.
Yeah, no, I understood that.
Yeah. So thank you, Andrew.
Chairman, we have Councillor Hughes.
Right, okay, I think the next one is Councillor Quantrill and then Councillor Hughes.
Councillor Quantrill here. My question has been answered, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. It again relates to noise. I just want to pursue this particular issue relating to noise attenuation over distance and through acoustic softening. You must have an intimation of the type of equipment you'll be using on site and how much noise that generates. Therefore, you get a dB level. That dB level will be attenuated over distance and equally over acoustic softening. Therefore, you must have some idea what the acoustic levels at a maximum point would be through all that stockpiles, walls and bunds before it hits stud lane. Can you give me an intimation of what it is you're trying to achieve? That's stud lane.
Can either of the applicants answer that?
Yes, I will answer that question. Yeah, one moment, please.
I'm sorry it's so scientific, but actually this is quite fundamental, I believe.
So effectively the noise impact assessment, which was obviously reviewed and assessed by the Environmental Health Officer, demonstrated that, as I explained before, it assessed the worst case scenario of all plant and all machinery that we may use on site at any one time, all operating simultaneously and continually. And on that basis, with the bunding in place at 2 metres, the nearest receptors which were assessed were 3 Bays Bungalow and Down Farm in Littleton. For the majority of the time, keeps the noise from the site below background noise levels. There's only one instance on a Saturday morning, if you're crushing, that you get an increase of +3 dB at 3 Bays Bungalow. And again, that is, it's +5 dB before you really notice any difference. So that was the conclusion, the noise impact assessment based on the 2 meters, and that was a worst case scenario as well, with everything operating in tandem.
I also think it's worth mentioning that they're not going to be crushing permanently all day long, every day of the week. They will stockpile a certain amount of material and then they will crush on a campaign basis. So it's a misconception to think that it'll be crushing all the time. So it'll only be sort of relatively rare that they'll be doing crushing.
Thank you for a very clear answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Do we have any more questions?
We just have Councillor McAvoy, Chairman.
Councillor McAvoy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. We talk about the noise assessments to the nearest property, and we were always led to believe there was just a bungalow there and nothing else. Do any of these noise assessments relate to the effect on livestock?
I think that's a question which perhaps our legal advisor might need to decide, because I imagine the noise assessment relate to humans rather than to livestock, but I might be wrong.
Thank you, Chairman. From the local planning authority's perspective, of course, as planning authority, we need to base our decision in planning law, which is primarily our policy. Policy 10 is the relevant policy that concerns impact of noise, and this is a document which is compiled from the public's point of view. So from the local planning authority's point of view, the relevant issue is the impact of noise on the public.
Does that answer your question? It's the public rather than horses, I think.
Well, I hear what we're being told, but in this case, they are sort of intertwined, aren't they?
Well, we can only go on what's in our plan. I can't add any more. Councillor James Hammond, our legal advisor, can only advise us of what is contained in the plan. So I note the point you are making as to whether they are or not intertwined. Do we have any other questions of the applicants? If not, then we move to our last deputy, last but not least. Last deputy is, of course, Councillor Warwick. Jan, welcome.
Yes, good morning, Chairman, and thank you again for allowing me to speak to this item, the inert waste recycling facility adjacent to Three Maids Hill at the northern entrance to the city of Winchester, and right on the border of my county division that I share with Councillor Jackie Porter. The report in front of us includes a significant number, just over 200 objections from my local residents and nearby parish councils, and all have highlighted in various ways the potential impact of noise, of dust, of vibration, on-site lighting, and 75 additional daily HGV movements to and from the site, which is accessed off the A272. I'm disappointed some of the technical reports arrived so late at the last minute, but I understand this meeting was arranged at fairly short notice. And I suppose our main issue this morning is the location of this site and the very unique circumstances we find ourselves in. And concerns have been raised on behalf of our non-voting equine residents, if you like, at the nearby Littleton stud. Although the stud is not formally a designated asset in planning terms, it is, for me, it's an important rural asset that is part of my community. It's part of my county division. And I think it is entitled to be protected by our planning policies, concerned very much with industrial development in the countryside. The proposed waste recycling site is conveniently close to the A34. We all understand that. You can see it on the maps. It is located on Grade 3 farmland just outside the city of Winchester. This is an industrial development on an agricultural site in a rural area. Not only is the application contrary to the Winchester District Local Plan Policy MTRA 4, but also we could consider it contrary to our own Policy 5B of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. This policy specifically aims to protect the countryside and states that waste development in the open countryside will not be permitted unless the nature of the development is related to the countryside activities, meets local needs, or requires a countryside location. The guidance in our Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan Policy 29 on page 107 discusses locations and sites for waste management. It definitely does support the development of recycling facilities along a strategic road corridor, as you would expect, and as is in this case. But our Policy 29 Part 2 also suggests suitable sites should consider industrial sites, redundant agricultural buildings, or hard standings on a scale compatible with the setting. Chairman, the National Planning Policy Framework, which is overarching, in paragraph 83, states that our planning policies and decisions should enable and support a prosperous and rural economy, including land-based rural businesses such as the Littleton Stud, a nationally known breeding nursery and retirement for top racehorses. They are understandably concerned about the impact of intermittent spikes of noise, their loss of tranquility, additional overnight lighting and working, and the level and the type of dust that will be created and may affect these animals. Chairman, I'm very nervous for them, and I suspect we would not give priority of one rural economic venture to the potential detriment of another. This successful rural business, i.e. the Littleton Stud, should be protected by our own Hampshire Minerals and Waste policies, outlined in Policy 6.205 on page 108. This is concerned with minimising the environmental emissions and impact caused by any facility of this type in proximity to sensitive animals. Chairman, in summary, I do not see the overwhelming evidence in support for this application that will justify ignoring some potential conflicts with local and county planning policy, with a significant impact on a nationally known Hampshire equestrian centre. We know that other suitable sites may be available, also with good access, so I request that you consider rejecting this application at this particular location. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for a considered, really good deputation. Appreciate that. I think all the deputies have now spoken, and they therefore play no further part in this application. I'm just going to ask the members firstly whether they have questions of any of the officers. I will just throw in to the mix a question that I might put to the legal advisor, James, in due course for him to think about. Is Councillor Warwick has mentioned a conflict between Para 5, the countryside, and Para 29 of the Mineral and Waste Plan. And I wonder if you might have any comments on the disparity between the two. But I'll give you a chance. Do other members have any other questions of the officers of Amy?
Chairman, I think I was going to ask the same question as you asked, the paragraph 5 and 29, which Councillor Warwick pointed out. In the report, it says that it's considered the proposal would be in accordance with the relevant policy of adopted Hampshire Mineral and Waste Plan 2013. So we've been guided by that this application meets the criteria. And now the Councillor Warwick says that it doesn't, so we have to be clarified. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I put the question to James for him to consider. Does anyone else have any other questions before he comes in on that one?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, Lance. Oh, Ray. Yeah. Yes.
Me, Chairman?
Yeah, got you.
Sorry to labour the point, but it concerns the distance between this Three Maids Hill site and the other site to the east of the A34. Could Amy state what the difference is in distance from the Littleton stud? Thank you.
I'm not sure whether we're going to get an answer to that. I do remember, or at least I thought I remembered, Mr. Bow saying he had no objection to that site, but I might be wrong. Amy, can you give a direct answer to Councillor Bow?
Bow did say that, Chairman.
Yeah, yeah. So, Amy, do you have any idea about the distance between the other site and the stud farm?
I'm afraid because it's not one of my applications, Chairman, I don't know the exact distance between.
Right. Okay, we're not going to get an answer. Councillor Philpott, you have a question of Amy.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chairman. The issue relating to the dust management plan I mentioned, I brought up with the applicant, and it was difficult I think, for him to answer because there were two completely conflicting positions that were taken within the same dust management plan. But I think the chairman concluded, and I think probably correctly, that it was felt that the first one of the two was correct, i.e., quote, that no dust emissions will escape the site boundary, unquote. That's what the dust management plan says. That I submit, therefore, to the officers that is a commitment from the applicant and from TMR that, as they say, no dust emissions will escape the site boundary. If we were to grant permission today, and subsequently, once this plant machinery started up and running, and there were receptors that picked up dust emissions from this site at those points outside of the site boundary, what position would the county council take in regard to that in terms of enforcement, bearing in mind that we have been given an undertaking that there will not be any emissions leaving the site? Thanks.
Amy, can you answer that, or do you want Chris to come in on that?
I'm afraid, because I'm not an enforcement officer, no. Chris is likely to have a better bearing on that.
Councillor Layton, I'll come in on that if that's okay, Lisa. Hello. Obviously, in terms of our monitoring enforcement duties, if this were to be granted planning permission, we would be monitoring the conditions associated with the permission, including the dust management plan. And if there were any breach of that, we would take the necessary enforcement action to ensure compliance. On top of that, as Amy's already mentioned, this would be the site would be subject to an environmental permit, which has obviously additional measures and additional monitoring of the operations of the site, and to a certain extent, more significant than what we can control through conditions. So there would be that organisation also monitoring the effectiveness of any of the schemes and the operations that are taking place on site. I hope that hopefully answers your question.
So would it therefore be the Environment Agency with their permit who would monitor dust from the site? And
we would monitor the effectiveness of what is governed by our conditions. The overarching operation of the site would also be monitored by the Environment Agency, and if needed, the environmental health officers would be involved, particularly in regards to noise.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got another hand up and I can't see who it is.
It's Councillor Quantrill, Chairman.
Oh, Councillor Quantrill. Lance, yeah.
Thank you. A question for the officers. We heard from Mr. Bridges and Mr. Austin in response to the question from Councillor Hughes that there would be a maximum on a Saturday morning of 3 decibels above ambient levels at the bungalow. Can the officers confirm that that's their understanding too, please?
Amy?
Yeah, I think Stuart was actually reading that from the noise impact assessment that was included in the documentation, and yes, that was my interpretation of that document as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then, I think we've now got all the questions of the officers. James Hammond, legal advisor, do you want to come back on on paragraphs 5 and 29 and their interrelationship?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My other officers and planning colleagues might want to provide some insight into this as well. Fundamentally, policy 29, which is the key policy for determining sites in the countryside, provides in part 3 that where a site is not previously developed land, it can still be viable for development, provided that there is a special need for the location and suitability of the site can be justified. So I suggest there's not a direct conflict between the policies. There is an acknowledgement of policy 5 in policy 29, and that is part 3 of policy 29 that is relevant to this application. Facts of assistance.
Right. Lisa, Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. Obviously, when officers are looking at the policies, we're looking at the whole of the plan in its entirety in terms of the relevant policies. So when we've been looking at the suitability of this start, we have judged it against policy 5 and 29, and on balance in relation to the need for the facility and the other considerations, we considered it to be compliant with those policies.
And in relation to the need for the facility, the need is for production of aggregates over an annual basis. I think that's policy 17. What is the annual need for aggregate provision, and where are we as a county on that?
Yeah, it's a really important point. Obviously, policy 17 sets out all the different areas of supply to give aggregates to Hampshire to meet the demand, of which recycled aggregate is one part of that. Policy 17 sets a figure of 1 million tonnes as a sort of a minimum figure for us to be striving for, and that is also reflected in policy 30. Monitoring of the performance of the plan in terms of capacities that we've got on the ground for this type of development and indeed sales is showing that we are below the 1 million tonne figure. The most recent figures we have are in the 2019 local aggregate assessment at a figure of 0.85 million tonnes per annum. So we're just below the 1 million tonnes. So this has been considered when Amy's been coming to her decision because this would provide valuable capacity to help us meet policies 17 and 30.
Thanks, Lisa. I've got one other hand up asking a question of the officers.
Chairman, we have Chris Murray has his hand up, and then I think we have a question from Councillor Price as well.
Right, Councillor Roger, Councillor Price. Roger.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Chairman, I wasn't going to ask a question of the officer. I was going to ask, can we have a 5-minute break, please?
Okay. Yes, we've been going for nearly 2 hours now. Yeah, we'll have a 5-minute break now. I think we've finished all the questions. So 5-minute break, and then we'll go into debate when we come back. So we'll come back at 12 o'clock. alive again, so the meeting's resuming again. Good to see you, Keith. I think Chris has got, Chris Murray wants to add something before we go into debate. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few comments which I hope will be helpful for members just before you start your debate. Firstly, there's been mention of planning policy, and I just wanted to clarify for members and remind members that obviously the Hampshire Minerals Waste Plan takes precedent over Winchester City Council's plan in this instance. Obviously, the Hampshire Minerals Waste Plan is the relevant plan for considering waste proposals, and as Lisa confirmed earlier, we've considered this proposal under Policy 29, which does allow for development in the countryside, provided the site has good transport connections to the sources and markets of waste, and that a special need for that location and the suitability of the site can be justified. That's the criteria in Policy 29 under Policy 29.3. And we think it complies with that element of the policy. So it's your minerals and waste plan that takes precedent when you're considering that policy. Just in terms of policy regarding impact on adjacent uses, and this has been obviously the subject of much of the questioning and discussion so far, quite rightly so. The policy requires that the impacts on human health and amenity are acceptable. That's the main thrust, both of national policy and your own policy. And we have to assume that if the impacts are acceptable for human health, then they are acceptable for other animals, species, etc. as well. That is really the test. So there is no other requirement in national or local policy that would put animals, if you like, above humans in terms of those impacts. So there's no other policy that you can point to in trying to assess that impact on the horses at Littleton Stud. Finally, I think the issue of the other site is not material to your consideration today. I think we've demonstrated or shown that it is further away than the application site. It is on the other side of the A34, but it's not directly relevant to the decision that you make today. You're looking at the impacts of the application site, and we're not comparing it with another site that's in the near vicinity. But I think, members, it's clear that that other site is further away from Littleton Stud than the application site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Well, members, we now go into debate on whether or not we're going to accept this recommendation to approve planning or not. Who wishes to open the debate?
We have Councillor Chowdhury first, Chairman.
Councillor Chowdhury, thank you. Charles. I can't hear you, Charles.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can now, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Stephen Philpott asked a very pertinent question regarding the dust and pollution earlier on, which I think I got some reservation about that, that how the dust can be, when it goes airborne, how can be suppressed by that time. But I think with the environmental agency and so on, they might have some control on that, the dust can be controlled by that way, or dumping with the water, whatever the case may be. I got some reservation about that. I think and also who would be, or liaison would be the council, the residents next door, or who are the people would be on that, and how we're going to, the time scale on meeting that one, I would be before the site can be, the work started on, or after the work started on. These are the things had to be addressed now than later on. Thank you, Chairman.
I don't know, Councillor Chowdhury. Obviously, if it's approved and there is a liaison panel, then there will obviously be people from the stud farm who would be on the liaison panel. There would be an officer from the county council on the liaison panel, and any, I would have thought, material residents close by who have an interest in the application and wish to attend. So, and it would be held, although the county council do not, as far as I know, organise them, it would be for, and obviously the owners would be members of the liaison panel. So there's your hub of people who would be on it, and it would meet as and when necessary. So we move, so that's, I think, the answer, and if I'm wrong, I'll be told, but I think that's the answer. The next second question, I think I've got Councillor Mark Cooper wishes to speak, then Rod Cooper and Councillor Hughes I've got. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I came to today's meeting with a predisposition for opposing the application, and I've had my arguments I've written down here gradually whittled away as the morning's gone on, primarily by Councillor Philpott's very insightful questions in relation to dust, and I think in a sense that's been resolved. I think the problem we've got now is not so much the application, but the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan and Policy 29, which I think needs a little bit more sophistication in its next iteration. And the reason I say that is that I come to the application with a concern about countryside being used for industrial use, designated landscape it isn't, but it's certainly an integral part of the mid-Hampshire Downs landscape, which is what the officers tell me. One of the axioms I gleaned when I worked in town planning some 51 years ago was that it wasn't the sweep of a highway, the A34 for example, that impacted on the landscape, but all the clutter that was associated with it. You know, the intensively used industrial sites such as Three Maids Hill and the other applications nearby. So in a sense, this is the key issue, that in a sense it's all the clutter that goes with transport corridors that is the landscape impact, and we need to have that, I think, noted in our next Hampshire Waste and Minerals Plan when we make a little more adjustment to that. The other thing that struck me was that during the site visit, officers referred to the land as poor quality agricultural land. Well, it ain't, Chairman. It's grade 3A and grade 3B. Grade 3A is good quality land and should never be built on. Grade 3B is moderate quality land. And then the officer states, but it's only 0.6 of a hectare, which is grade 3A. Well, yes, that's true, but that's a third of the site. And then we see, oh dear, Natural England says that unless it's 20 hectares, you don't need to worry about losing it. Well, I'm afraid they're wrong. Agricultural land is a resource that's very, very hard to win back, even when the applicant says they'll restore the land at the end of their process. So on a matter of principle, I'm very opposed to the application, but nevertheless, I do note that all the objections that I have been whittled away as the morning has gone on, and frankly, I'm not going to be able to oppose it, which is unfortunate because I really want to oppose it. Because I know that in future, residents of Winchester will tell us, how on earth did that site ever get the go-ahead? And the reason it may get the go-ahead this morning is because our policies are not tight enough to protecting areas of countryside like this particular site.
Thank you, Mark. I love your comments about the mineral waste plan. In a previous life, I can remember that with the NPPF, you could always find in it something to support your argument, but you could also find a paragraph which went completely against your argument. So it was a really brilliant document, whichever way you went. Anyway, thank you, Mark. Councillor Rod Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened very carefully this morning, and to be perfectly honest with you, if you look at each of our policies, that each one of them can be interpreted either way. But if you look at the whole thing together, and certainly with some of the comments that have been made by fellow councillors, not least of which Councillor Warwick, the questioning by Councillor Philpott with regard to the dust and no dust, and looking at National Park Planning Policy 83, I can't support this. I just don't feel it's an appropriate development for this site. I just feel that yes, we can each of the our own policies can be batted either way, but if you look at them all together, for me, I think it's a step too far. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, I think, is next.
Thank you, Chairman. This is going to be a really interesting debate. It's good. I must say from the outset, without any shadow of doubt, this is no criticism of the officers or ourselves as a group of members, without any doubt, a physical visit to this site would have been absolutely beneficial to our deliberations today. To be able to stand there and witness and see for ourselves what is actually happening, rather than relying on drone footage, videos and maps that we've been using today, I'm sure it would have made our decision much, much easier. The 0.85 achievement of our Hampshire Waste and Minerals Plan suggests that we're 150,000 tonnes short. Therefore, there is a need for this site in terms of what it produces. The 3 points that have been raised today show to centre around risk, potential for problems, and mitigation of those potential problems. And those two problems relate to noise and dust. I thought Councillor Philpott's delving into the issue relating to dust was very helpful. Their dust management plan is all about no dust, no particles should leave the site. That is their intent. That's what's specified in their Environment Agency licence, and that is their plan to achieve that. The fact we're going to have a panel that will determine whether they are achieving that liaison panel will go some way towards the policing of that plan. And then I asked the questions about noise, and noise is really important because Littleton Stud mentioned that the A34 now provides ambient background noise. It's there sort of in the background, you don't really notice it. And where I sit here, I occasionally hear the A3M, I occasionally hear the M27, depending which way the wind blows. Now, the applicant said that the wind blows for the most part 98% away from Littleton Stud. They actually say it's 2% towards Littleton Stud based on the prevailing winds. So from a noise point of view, they also said that in their noise management plan, based on the data they have for the equipment they use, if they used all of that equipment and it's the same time, the mitigation they've put in place in terms of the stockpiles, the walls and the bunds, it would keep it below the ambient noise. That is if they used all of that equipment at the same time, which is clearly unrealistic and not likely to happen. So therefore, on that basis, we talk about noise, we talk about dust, we talk about pregnancy in the country, we talk about the need. I was a bit like Councillor Cooper. You think, oh, why are we doing this? And through the debate and the questions and the deputations we had this morning, I am in favour of supporting this proposal. So I would like to support the recommendations to go with the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Philpott. You seem to be the star of the morning. Over to you.
I really don't think so, Chairman. Thank you anyway. But I've found this an exceptionally difficult decision to make. It's exceptionally difficult because I'm going to disagree with Chris, actually, not on his professional judgment, because I never would disagree with Chris on his professional judgment. But in that, I think that we really ought to, and we should always take into consideration wildlife, and in this particular case, these thoroughbred horses and the impact that this could have on them, and the close proximity to the stud farm. So whilst in the letter of our Hampshire Minerals local plan, it may not necessarily mention the welfare of horses and just of people, I think that every member of this committee would probably not necessarily wholeheartedly agree with that, and would certainly think that the horses need to be taken into consideration at least. So looking at the impacts, we heard a number of things about noise, And I can see that the applicants have worked very hard over the last few weeks to try to mitigate some of the potential problems that may have arisen from this debate and this decision by increasing the height of the noise band, for instance, and also bringing in legal opinion. But I have to say, on balance, I think that the mitigation that the applicant is intending to put in place to defend against noise from the site is adequate, and probably more than adequate. So, and I think with the prevailing winds being westerly rather than in the opposite direction, I'm not persuaded that noise is a factor. Councillor Burgess in his deputation mentioned other potential developments that may take place in the location. And I'm afraid that, you know, I've been on a planning committee for quite a long time, and I know that we can't take into consideration what may or may not happen in the future for other planning applications or considerations. So it came down for me, as other members have alluded to, Chairman, to whether or not the dust from the site and whether the particulates would be a factor which could persuade me to oppose the application. I'd like it minuted, and I'm sure it will be, but I'd like it minuted that we questioned the applicant at this committee regarding the dust plan and the dust management plan, and that when questioned, we clarified that the assurance written within the dust management plan that dust emissions, quote, will not escape the site boundary was confirmed by the applicant, and therefore, on those circumstances, bearing in mind that this will be subsequently monitored by both Hampshire County Council and the Environment Agency, I will expect that to be the case. And I'm sure like my colleagues, I hope my colleagues on this committee will be, let's say, extremely disappointed if subsequently, if this application receives consent today and that dust particulates from this site are detected at receptors around and outside of the boundary, they'll be extremely disappointed that the dust management plan, which was given an assurance that there would not be dust particulates, has been breached. And I would expect and hope that that both the Environment Agency and this county council, in terms of enforcement, will take that into consideration when they look back at the minutes of this meeting and the determination that's been made. So in that context, Chairman, I would say regretfully, as I agree with Councillor Mark Cooper, I cannot find, I'm afraid, anything within the Hanson Minerals Waste Local Plan that gives me grounds to oppose. So I shall be supporting the application.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for your eloquent speech then. I'm sure we take your point, and I'm sure it will be minuted within the records for this meeting. Does anyone else wish to speak on it? I can see some more hands going up.
Councillor Carter and Councillor Quantrill, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Carter, and then Councillor, and then Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm sure Katie has noted that I've been in and out of the meeting this morning. Unfortunately, I've had an electrical problem, which has taken out my power. So it's been a very interesting debate, but I don't think, well, I can't vote. I listened with interest to the discussion about policy and the conflicts of the policy, but the policy, of course, is guidance for us to interpret. And I, without declaring my position, because I won't vote, I've been very interested to hear the presentation, well, not presentation, the debate from Councillor Phil.
Chairman, may I have a word briefly? My apologies, Councillor, if you've not been able to attend during the deputations and questions, unfortunately, you shouldn't take part in the debate either. as well as voting. I'm sorry.
Well, I heard some of it. Okay, right. I'll withdraw.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Thanks, Chris. And then finally, Councillor Quantrill. Lance.
Thank you, Chairman. Back in December, had we taken a vote, I would have been minded to refuse this application. And Mr. Bowes' explanation of his detailed explanation of his business and the nature of the horses, livestock, were leading me this morning to the same conclusion. However, on consideration of the details which you've heard for dust mitigation, thank you, Councillor Philpott, and noise quantification, thank you, Councillor Hughes, and also the increase from 2 metres to 3 metres of the bund, I feel that on balance, this is an application I can support.
Thank you for that. I've seen Councillor Chowdhury has now got his hand up. So, Councillor Chowdhury.
Chairman, can I say that, the deferment of this application, having a virtual meeting, I think persuaded most of the councillor, because a lot of debates and a lot of questions been answered this morning. I think the fellow councillor changed their mind because they were adamant in the that meeting that the application was not meeting the criteria. Now they feel that they are meeting the criteria of this application, or the application meets the merits of the planning. So I will be, obviously, I was two-minded that day as well, so I'll be supporting this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sharon. I think we have therefore now concluded the debate.
Chairman, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ray.
Let me just very briefly give the opposite point of view. Looking back at the original report, the executive summary, page 83, key issues. There are a number of those key issues, starting with rural location, potential amenity and health impacts. And I could go on, and also listening to and how the concerns of Councillor Jan Warwick and Councillor Jackie Porter last month, and this morning the concerns of Councillor Stephen Burgess, Melanie Iredale, and of course Councillor Jan Warwick again. Given all those issues and concerns, I cannot support granting permission for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there anyone, is there any, I can see another hand has now gone up. Who is that?
We've got Councillor Hare and then Councillor McAvoy, Chairman.
Right. Councillor Hare.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to all the deputations, reading the report, and with all the latest presentations that have come in, my concerns are site operation and material movements. Site operations, the hours that they said, fine, it's okay, I'm sure they will comply. Material movements, 50 to 76 movements per day. Is that going to be enforced? The noise, dust, and being so close to Littleton Stud Farm concerns me. And also, with these heavy vehicles, the wear and tear on the roads, that concerns me. The species and the habitat, that concerns me. So for all those reasons, I'm afraid I cannot support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Hare. Councillor McAvoy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Unlike Councillor Cooper, I came to the meeting expecting to support this application. And as the debate has gone on, there is very little that has encouraged me to support it. In fact, one of the, I'll just check his name, one of the Stuart Austin, I think it was, one of the, on behalf of the applicant, I felt that what he said reinforced the view that in fact it should not be supported. I was disappointed that when we asked questions at the site meeting, that when we asked how far the nearest house was, we were told, well, it was only just across the road, but it was only a bungalow. all of this business about the stud farm never came into discussion. There are so many things that I can't agree with what's been discussed here. And being on a local liaison panel, I know only too well there's always good intentions from applicants, but you can't stop dust flying, you can't stop the noise, you can mitigate it, but you can't stop it. And in effect, we're being asked to choose between the viability of an existing business and a new business. And the countryside, the protection of the countryside and the businesses within the countryside itself are far more important to me. So there is absolutely no way that I can support this application.
Thank you, Councillor McAvoy. Are there any other people who wish to speak?
We have Councillor Price, Chairman.
Councillor Price. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, to me, the big issue is noise. I take the point from the applicant about the dust, that they're guaranteeing that there'll be no dust. So I take them on their word that that's what will be happening. But noise is the issue to me, is because if you look at the plant, running all the plant, that's just the engines of those machines ticking over. We all know that when you get a site like this, it's a concrete base with the pickup trucks or JCBs, whatever they might be. They're scraping the bottom of the buckets along that concrete to actually pick up whatever they're picking up on a number of occasions. And that's where you get a lot of noise. I mean, I've heard it, seen it from many sites. It's not just the noise of the machinery turning over. You can create a lot of extra noise by the scraping along the concrete bases. So, and I'm not convinced that that noise level will be, with the machinery going, with that, and the tipping of the material into a truck to go out to start with, that will create noise again, which is above the noise of the machinery running. So I think the noise within the site is probably far greater than just all the machinery running at any given point. So I'm not satisfied that that issue has been totally covered. So I'm not at all happy about it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Does anyone else wish to express their views on the merits of the application?
We have, Councillor House, Chairman.
Councillor House.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is this is an incredibly difficult application, isn't it? And
yeah.
I think that we probably all of us struggled in different ways on this one, and my mood has swung in different directions on this as we've gone through it. And on balance, my view is not to support the application. I think there are just too many issues that are on the edge, and one of our jobs as a local authority is when we get to situations that are totally in the balance to err on the side of caution. I'm not naturally a cautious person, but I think sometimes with planning, and in particular planning in sensitive sites like this, you only get one chance to get it wrong. And there is a real risk that we could use that chance this afternoon now, sorry. So on balance, for the variety of reasons that have been expressed in the last few contributions, I won't be supporting the application.
Thank you, Keith. I think we've probably heard from everybody now on the debate, and so we can go to taking a vote on this. I wouldn't like to say which way that vote is going to go. I could perhaps remind members who wish to vote against that those who wish to go against have to give valid reasons, planning reasons within the Hampshire Mineral and Waste Plan as to why they have rejected this application, reasons which are defendable at an appeal. So that's we will have to come to that if it is not approved. I'm now going to pass over to Katie to conduct the debate, the vote on this item. And the recommendation of the officers is that planning permission should be granted subject to all parties enter into a Section 106 agreement to secure appropriate lorry routing, that the conditions listed in Appendix A to the 16th of December committee report as amended by the associated update report and the 20th of January 2021 update report. So its planning permission be granted subject to those amendments. So Katie, can you take the vote for or against?
Thank you, Chairman. And just to confirm, as Councillor Carter said, if members feel they haven't been in attendance for all of the meeting this morning, then they will need to abstain from voting. I will go through alphabetically, and if you could just confirm whether you are for, against, or if you are abstaining. So Councillor Bolton?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, I understand you're abstaining, aren't you, from the vote?
I will have to abstain, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Chowdhury?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Cooper?
For.
Councillor Rod Cooper?
Against.
Councillor Frankham?
Against.
Councillor Gibson?
Sorry about that. I just, when I was on mute. I'm going to abstain. I can't make a decision on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Hare?
Against.
Councillor House?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Irish?
Against.
Councillor Latham?
For.
Councillor McAvoy?
Against.
Councillor Philpott?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Price?
Against.
And Councillor Quantrill?
For.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, Chairman, we have 6 members in favour of the recommendations, 8 against and 2 abstentions.
Right, so the recommendation is not approved. So we need to know from those who opposed it what the reasons for refusal are, which have got to be put forward now. So is anybody going to come forward? So what are the defendable rules, objections?
Yes, Councillor. Yes, Chairman.
Right, so they are?
So my reasons for being against are the rural location of the site, the potential loss of amenity and the health impacts to the Littleton Stud and the that area, and concerns about the working hours, but that's linked to the loss of amenity. I think that's a starter from me in terms of reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I confirm then that's loss of amenity, so you're minded to refuse because you do not believe the application is in accordance with policy 10 of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan in respect to the noise and amenity, and you do not believe that the application is in accordance with policy 29 in respect of the location. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does anyone else wish to add anything further to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to add National Planning Framework 83 regarding the countryside.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd be grateful if you could refer to our own Minerals and Waste Plan for
well, it would be on interpretation of policy 5B and 29.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's as far as we can take it today. James, is there anything else you wish to add to those? Oh, Councillor House, have you got something to add to it? Keith, are you muted?
Oh, I'm sorry. I muted
right.
myself rather than unmuted myself. Painful process. Like many of us suspect this morning, I don't have the documents right in front of me. I've got obviously the report for today, but not the minerals plan. Clearly, our planning team and our legal team will have listened very carefully to the debate, and even though they came to a different conclusion than the elected members, they have got the planning expertise to interpret what's in front of us and to finesse what's been said over the last 5 minutes into quality reasons for refusal. We have in the past at different points, I'm not quite sure if it was under your chairmanship or not, Joan, we have in the past finessed these by email after the meeting, given the broad brush of the reasons that have been put forward by elected members. And I wonder whether that might be the best way forward today, given the fact that officers didn't have sort of a template set of reasons for us to put forward in the event of the committee coming to a different conclusion from their recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Chairman, if I may, I think I'd be most comfortable from point of view of going forward if we thank you for your suggestion, Councillor House, but I think I'd like to just get confirmation from the remaining objectors. Thank you, Councillor Bolton and Cooper, that they either agree with the reasons for refusal proposed by Councillor Bolton and Cooper, or they have additional reasons. Councillor House, would you mind confirming that's the case or not?
Yes, through you, Chairman, I am. I think one of my points is that sometimes when we are rushed to provide detailed reasons for refusal at this point in the process, we can occasionally just put forward, alongside some good reasons for refusal, the odd reason which is not particularly strong. And often it's better to knock those weaker reasons out before proceeding to a decision notice, and that's the kind of technical advice that I think might be helpful later. But I'm content with what's been proposed so far.
Chris, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. From what I've heard, I think that there's probably two elements to what members have suggested. And one is that you're not satisfied that the proposal or that the applicant has demonstrated a special need for the location and that the site suitability is justified, contrary to policy 29. And then not satisfied on the basis of the information submitted that the use can be carried out without causing unacceptable adverse impacts on amenity and business activity in the vicinity due to noise and dust, contrary to policy 10 of the plan.
I think that's it, for better or worse, Chris. That has to be it. Nothing else has been suggested.
Well, I think, Chairman, that summarises the concerns that have been raised, and I think members have referred to both of those policies in debate and discussion, and I think that's a fair summary of what members are feeling, those that are opposed to the proposal.
Right. I think then that's as far as we can go. So that's the only item on the agenda. So thank you to everybody for attending on what's been a very difficult decision. I respect the decision, and we will have to see what happens next. So I'm going to now close the meeting. Thank you to everybody for attending. Thank you for your patience.